In terms of starting out, I think I'm very fortunate that at the age of 14, I bought my first computer and just fell in love and knew that's what I wanted to do. So I think that's probably the hardest struggle a lot of people have today, especially folks who are in high school, is what do I want to do? And a lot of folks end up going to college for 6 years trying to figure out instead of 4, because the first 2 are trying to figure out what you want to do. So for me, I really started off right away, knew that's what I wanted to do, and started taking computer programming classes. And really back then, computers were just starting to come out, so this was the mid-'80s. Computer programming wasn't formalized, but there were a lot of books available, so I just read a lot of books on programming and things like that. And the one thing I will add is that this is why I'm such a big fan. So Faye Ward, I will always remember her name. I have a book signed by her where she had wished me good luck. And she was my high school computer programming teacher, and she saw something, a little spark in me, and invested a little extra time and actually set up a computer programming class that would go and do competitions. So we did competitions back then, and so I just think it speaks volumes to how critical it is for our teachers today and how they can inspire our youth and what they can do. So that's really what got me going. And then as I went into university, I knew I wanted to do computers, so I started with information systems or typical classes there. So. The main thing is I love solving problems, and that's what computer programming is to me. It's all about solving problems and figuring out how to make something work. And I always enjoyed working with my hands. I grew up in the summers on a farm and trying out how to fix things and figure things out. That's how my brain was wired. So that's from that beginning. It was always about solving problems. And really, to me, what's amazing about computers is once you get over that initial barrier of acquiring one, it's limitless, and especially today, right? Back then we didn't have the internet and things like that, but I could spend hours and hours and hours learning and creating things, and that to me was just really enjoyable. A couple of things that I'd like to mention about that, and I'm glad you asked that question because I'd like to tell a short story, and it goes back to my beginnings. As I mentioned, I grew up on a farm in the summers, and pretty humble beginnings, background, and I had in my mind that if I had a good job and was providing for my family, that was probably as good as I was ever going to do. I didn't really have a lot of faith in myself, a lot of confidence. And the story I always tell is I went into tanks, and you may not think about it, but it's actually a very high-tech field. Even back in the early 90s, it has a jet engine in it. There's encrypted radio communication technology. There's a very sophisticated firing system on the tank, etc. And so when I joined the military, I was surrounded by 300 other guys just like me who grew up in farms in South Dakota and wherever else, and really we didn't know what we could do, what our possibilities were. And fast forward, 16 weeks later, we graduated from our basic training and our schooling, and I remember it's really etched in my mind walking into what's called the motor pool where all the equipment is, and so the hatches are open on the tank and engines are pulled out, and over in the combo room, there's guys working on electronic equipment, and I realized that these were the same guys. It was guys like me, and they were doing these things that I thought were amazing. They were soldering and working on circuit boards, and I was just blown away. And I realized at that point that if you give people the right training, the right tools, and the right leadership, they can accomplish anything. So that was step number one, was just realizing that. But then it also gave me the confidence to say, well, if I have the right tools and the right training and the right leadership, I can do anything. And so that was the first step around leadership, is recognizing that not only about other people, but myself. And then the second part, which was most important to me, was that the leadership that everyone admired when I saw it. So you had officers, and you had enlisted, and then you had some people who had done both, so they were enlisted and officers. And it was the leaders, so whether it was a sergeant or a lieutenant, that rolled up their sleeves and were in the field with us and were guiding us and leading the way. Those are the ones we admired and respected the most. And those are the guys that we would literally lay our life on the line for. And that's what it taught me, was that true leadership. It's about leading by example. It's about getting in there and being with your troops and understanding who they are and what they're going through and what they're doing. If you look, you'll notice that I kind of said at the beginning, people trying to figure out what they wanted to do. I'm not excluded from that either. So I actually went first to Kennesaw and got my bachelor's in information systems, but then went back and got a master's in computer science and robotics and software engineering. And because I thought I wanted to be a CTO. What I realized at GE, I had started getting pulled into more and more business transformation projects. And I realized that I really loved that side of it, because it was, again, solving problems. on the business side. And as I did that more and more, I realized that being a CIO, which was really more about managing as much as the business side as you do the technology side, is what I wanted to do. So then I decided, well, if I'm going to go down that path, I need to have the proper education, know about financial management, know about the business management, and that's why I went back to Emory and did my MBA. Sure. Well, it's an interesting journey, to say the least.
So let me talk.
Yeah. So, yeah. If you do look at it, it's I sold beer for 5 years, basically. I started slinging beer off a truck and became an account manager. And what I would say is that everyone, that the best thing you can do is be open to opportunities. I was very driven when I got out of the military, and I already felt like I was 4 years behind. I had spent time in the military, and I was behind everybody else who went straight to college. And I had this plan. I had it all planned out, exactly what was supposed to happen and when. Zero of that actually happened. And I fought it for a long time. And it was really difficult for me. And once I threw that out the window and I said, okay, there's a plan out there for me, and I need to be more open to what comes to me, it changed everything. And so it was all about opportunities. And so I would have never dreamed that in my career of being a computer programmer, which is where I was then, that selling beer off a truck would be what I would be doing. But that kind of opportunity came along, and I was a bit restless, and I said, well, you know what, I'm going to do that. And so I started off, as I mentioned, selling beer off a truck, but I over 5 years, worked my way up to being an account manager for some of the major accounts down in Central Florida. And what I learned from that was how to talk to customers, how to understand customers, how to be more social. I was your typical, hey, that's the programmer you want to put in the back closet, let him do his thing. But after that experience, I really learned, oh wow, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy solving customer problems too. So that's really what started off. But I did, after 5 years, have to kind of remind myself and say, wait a minute, I know you're having fun, but you're supposed to do this career thing with computers. And that's when I then moved on to GE. This is where I would again say opportunities came in a different way. That when the door was opened, I jumped through it. So I got very fortunate at General Electric that it was right when there was it's called the power bubble back in the late 90s, and there was a tremendous need to transform that business. And so Jack Welch said, we've got tremendous demand. We need to open up, transform this business. It's all guys with blueprints on their desk and very few computers. And he basically said, if you can build a business case and we can make the business move faster, you've got an open checkbook. And so that's what I got to do. And I moved into that, and that's where I started learning more about the business and learning that side of myself. And then as that progressed, and this is what I would really encourage all of you to think about as you go into internships or you go into your jobs. GE was phenomenal. It's still phenomenal. It's a great, great organization at creating opportunities for people who want to go get them. So when they would say, hey, there's a Six Sigma class, who wants to go? I was the first one to raise my hand. I said, sign me up. When they said, okay, now we have black belt courses available, I was the first one to raise my hand. And so I was just a sponge. And I jumped on every opportunity was there, and that would end up opening another door. Same thing when I was at Recall, which is where I went after General Electric. I was very fortunate that I was there at a time when the business really needed to be transformed. And there was a business program that started up, and I was asked to lead that. It was way out of my comfort zone. But I could see that it was going to be something really good for my career and my learning. And so I took that, and that led to other opportunities and really accelerated my career from there. And so that's really what it's all about, is just, I think, being open to opportunities. You may think you have a set path ahead of you. It's not going to work out that way, I can tell you. It's going to be much different if you let it, and it'll be much more enjoyable, I think. It'll be much richer. You'll experience more things. So that's sort of in a nutshell my path. But what I will say, and talk a lot about what I did right. There's a lot I did wrong, and a lot of that was I thought I could do it all myself. I thought, hey, I'm smart, I work hard, I'll make opportunities happen. And really, it took me way too long to figure it out that that's completely wrong. You do nothing by yourself. It's all about those you surround yourself with. It's about getting help. It's asking for mentors, asking for coaches. It's about what you guys are doing right here. It's about creating groups that help each other out. That's what it's all about. And once I figured that out, my career went a lot faster because I was finally smart enough to realize that I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, and that the more people I had that were helping me along the way, and the more people I helped, the better off things were. So that's really what it's all about: opportunity and realizing you're not in it by yourself. You're going to either be helping or be helped by others. So on the CTO path, it's really all about the technology. It's about how to solve problems using all the technologies available and knowing them at a very deep level. and understanding how they work, how they fit together, the challenges of making them integrate and work together, things like that, and being able to pull together teams that can make that technology work. As a CIO, it's a lot more about the alignment with the business. So how do you ensure that you're solving business problems with that technology? A CTO, part of the reason I like that so much is you get to play with a lot of toys, right? It's a lot of fun. You get to try a lot of different technologies. But really what businesses need is you to solve a business problem, either generate growth or revenue or reduce cost. And that's what it's really about on the CIO side, is more about how do I ensure that these technologies are used appropriately. Every organization has limited resources, and that's really the CIO's job. And that's the difference, is saying, well, how do I take these limited resources and make sure the right technologies are used? I think that's, in today's world, that's the challenge we have is it's the foundation of everything today. So no matter what group you're in, whether you're in HR or you go into legal or finance, computers are there, and you have to have a fundamental knowledge of how to use them. So I think it's critical to have that foundational knowledge about computers and how they work. And I know that's being worked into the curriculum. I know a lot of the high schools now are teaching, Microsoft Office and the basic tools of how to get around. But a fundamental understanding is really important, because a lot of the decisions you make will be around how to leverage the systems you have available to you. I'll mention two. Actually, let me mention three, if I could do that really quickly, to kind of show you the levels that it goes. And I'll tell a story about this, because I think it's very, it's a couple of great stories. So the first one is actually when I was at General Electric, and so my boss's boss, Mike, had been at GE for many, many years, and he was pretty high up in the company, and many years back, well, probably I'd say maybe 10 at that point back, he'd been in the company 20, almost 30 years at that point. He was at a presentation with Jack Welch, and they were doing a quarterly review. And so basically you come in, you have 45 minutes to review, and this is kind of dated a little bit. This is before PowerPoint. These are the acetate slides you write on, you put it on a projector. And the story he tells is that he got to sit in on this review all day. And as always, these things run late. And so the poor last guy at the end, he had about 5 minutes or 15 minutes instead of his 45. And so he walks in and Jack says, look, I got a hard stop. You got 15 minutes to do your presentation, not 45. And the story is the guy started fumbling with his deck and just fell apart. And then Jack basically said, never mind, you can present next time. And the story goes that there was no next time. Jack was Neutron Jack. That's what he was known for, right? So this was a person who was pretty high up in the company. And because he dropped the ball at this presentation, and it left an impression with Jack, and Jack said, well, if he can't, handle a presentation being cut down, how's he going to run my business? And so that person was gone before too long. And my boss, was terrified, and he said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. And he went out and hired a presenting coach. And then we also said, which is the mentoring part, he said, and I'm never going to let that happen to anybody that works for me. And so anyone who became a manager or a leader in his group, he sent them to a summer course learning presenting skills. And part of that course was you had to start with a 2-hour presentation. You did it every 2 weeks. You start with a 2-hour presentation, and you had to end with an 8-second presentation and get the same message across. And so, it helps you. It really is a tremendous help. So that's number one, is that when you see things happen, you can make sure that you prepare yourself not to have those problems, but also thinking about the folks that you have that are coming behind you. And so that's how he drove it down from that management perspective. The boss I had at that time, though, Rich Reno at GE, he was a great mentor, and he really went out of his way to open up opportunities for me. And honestly, that's what a mentor is all about. It's about giving advice, but it's also about helping open up opportunities and keeping your ear open. And that's what I try and do for my folks, is I want to understand where they want to go. What do they need to learn? What experiences do they need? And that's what my job as a mentor is when I'm sitting in a meeting and someone says, hey, we have a project that we need to do X, and I can say, oh, one of my people, has asked to grow in that area. Can they lead that project, right? And so that he was very good at that. And that's when I ended up going everything from transformation work to research and development, all types of different things. And he really opened up opportunities for me, because he thought, we thought at the time that I wanted to be a CTO. So he really opened up a lot of technology opportunities. The last I'll talk about is still a current mentor, Jason Malfettis, who was the CIO at Recall when I was there. I had not made that CIO transition yet. I was a senior director for global transformation. And when he started, I actually was at a crossroads in my career. I had just led a big business transformation program, and the North American president wanted me to go work on more business projects. Jason had came on board as a CIO, and he said, well, we've got a lot of work to do in IT. I'd like you to come back in IT and lead some things. And so I said, well, I'll make a deal with you. I want to be a CIO. I figured that out now. And this is when I had my master's for robotics and software engineering and didn't have my MBA. And I said, I'll make a deal with you. If you help me, figure out how to become a CIO, I'll come back into IT. And, obviously he upheld his end of the bargain. And there's a couple things. One was that's when we realized, well, you need an MBA. If you want to be a CIO, you've got to know the business side of it. You need an MBA. And he sponsored me to go back and do my MBA, which is really phenomenal. But the story I always tell with people when I start mentoring is I think that was probably a Monday that we agreed to all this. I started working for him. And on Tuesday, we had a meeting. And he was in it and several other individuals who were presenting on something. And so afterwards, he says, hey, come to my office right after this meeting. And he said, well, first a couple things. He's like, tell me about body language in the room. And I was like, well, I guess everybody was okay. And he's like, well, no, this person had their arms crossed. This person was doing this. This person was doing this. This person was doing this. And he's like, so that helps you read who's engaged. So he gave me some very good feedback about starting to learn a room. He's like, we got to work on that. You've got to be able to start reading a room. And then he looks at me and he says, and those shoes don't go with that suit. Now, the worst part of that was when I got home that night and I told my wife that story, and she said, I told you that last night when you were getting ready that those shoes didn't go with that suit. And so he was a really well-rounded mentor because he was looking at everything. What was my presence? How did I present myself? What was I doing when I was in rooms? And of course, he really took a gamble on me and gave me responsibility for some really big things. And because of that, I was able to prove what I could do. I learned a lot in the process. And so I wouldn't be here today without mentors. And so I'm a big proponent of mentoring. And I once heard, I believe it was Becky Blaylock, who used to be a CIO at Southern Company. Now, great statement that I think those who have a mentor are 3 times more successful. And those who are mentees are 5 times more successful. Because you learn as much from a mentee as you do being a mentor. It's phenomenal. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I think we need more of that in the industry. It's funny. I think most companies today struggle with too many meetings, and so that's a constant struggle with any leadership. And so usually the morning starts off with me getting in pretty early, and I try and catch up on emails and make sure I get things set for the day. And then it's usually in the meetings all day to get status update on things, see things where things are at, meeting with others in the company. And there's 2 things that I've learned over the years that are really, really critical. You can get into that meeting madness, and you can forget about some of the other things that are important. So one is it's really important for me to collaborate and meet with and talk to my peers in the business. So the SVPs, our presidents, our finance leaders, our legal leaders, etc. And so I'm really trying to make sure I carve out time for that. And the other is I need to get out and talk to my folks, right? I need to get out and be at the different locations that we have and talking to people and joining their meetings and making sure I know what's going on with them. So that's usually what my days are made up of is emails in the morning, emails in the evening, but during the day it's a lot of meetings. It's getting together either on project-specific stuff of how things are running, and there's a cadence there between keeping your eye on the financials, keeping your eye on projects, keeping your eye on your human resource agenda, things like that, and then it's meeting with people outside of your organization and meeting with people inside your organization. So I always bring it back to data. And the first thing I would do, and I can give you a very, very tangible example. When I was at Recalls, when I really, and luckily I had this mentor then who helped me through this, was when I really had that first challenge. There was a very senior person, and they just weren't on board with this transformation program they were doing. And he was trying to throw up every roadblock that he could. And so the way I approach that is I go in and say, well, tell me everything that you disagree with. Tell me every problem you have. And I'm going to go back and figure out how to solve that problem. And you get that person to agree with you and say, okay, these are the 10 things that you think are wrong or broken or you disagree with. If I can come back and show you that I've either solved them or there's a way around it, would you be on board with this? And it's really getting that buy-in and agreement. And once you do that, you sort of disarm the person. And then they slowly, you build credibility. And they slowly turn the corner before you know it, they're on board with it. So every situation is different. You're not always going to win. You're not always going to be able to get where you want. And so but the first avenue is to work directly with that person. And if that doesn't work, then a lot of times you may have to gather a coalition, so to speak, of people around that person to say, hey, well, look, if I can't get this one on board, if this is the right thing for the whole organization, then let me get the 10 other people on board, and we'll make it happen. And that person won't be happy, but ultimately, if it's the right thing to do, it generally works out. So I think it's about EQ. It's about emotional intelligence. Absolutely. I think IQ is important, but as I mentioned, if you have someone with this is going to sound horrible, but a low IQ and high EQ, well, they're going to be very good at surrounding themselves with very high IQ people, and they're going to get it done. But if you reverse that equation, they have high IQ and low EQ, it's very different. The imitation game about Turing, right? I think is a great example of that. Brilliant man, socially and EQ-wise, disaster, right? But he eventually figured it out that it's not about him; it's about the team he had built together, right? So I think it's all about EQ. That's how you leverage the most out of people, is understanding them and understanding how to make them achieve what they want to achieve, which then helps you achieve what you want to achieve. So I think and that's something I had to learn myself. I thought it was all about IQ when I started, and I was wrong.
So, what do you think is the value of having some internships or like real life experience when in college or high school?
I think it's anywhere you can start. One of the stories I also tell is that I did grow up from very humble beginnings, and I don't know if it's still in place today. I should probably check. But when I was growing up in Florida, they had something called JTPA, the Job Training Partnership of America, and it was a great program, and it was for underprivileged individuals to have an opportunity. And so when I was 14 years old, I started that program, and the first, I believe it was 6 or 8 weeks, they taught you job skills. How to, maybe not match your shoes with your suit, but at least how to, make sure you're wearing appropriate clothing, and make sure you conduct yourself appropriately, and how to write a resume and get yourself started. And so that's what I did. I did internships for 3 summers as I was going through high school, and it really gave me, number one, a resume. So when I walked out from the Army, at least I had a resume of some work I had done as I was trying to put myself through college. And so I think it's critical. I think anything you can do, even volunteering is great, right? So if you can't get an internship or you can't get a part-time job, even just volunteering, you'll learn a lot, right? And again, it's not about so much the resume and having something on there, it's what you're going to learn as an individual. I learned so much over those summers about how to be successful. It's critical.
Dave Hudson, thank you.